Section 2.5 is on more factoring techniques. And in part A, we're going to start by factoring trinomials with coefficient A not equals 1. So it's going to be a number in these that are going to make it a different technique in the previous section. So it's going to be a number in front of x squared and a value. So there are two main strategies for factoring something of this form. The first is the trial and error strategy. The trial and error strategy says that what I need to do is to consider what numbers would need to be in front of x to multiply to a. Also consider what numbers need to be in the end of the parentheses to multiply to c. And then keeping in mind that when I multiply these terms out, the coefficient of the first term is going to multiply by the last term. First and last term, of course. The first term just gives the x squared term. To get the x term, I use first and last. To get the other x term, I use last and first. The sum of these two mixed products is going to add to my b. Okay, so instead of just grabbing c, trying two numbers that go to c to add to b, I have to look at two numbers that come from both a and c, but add to b. Okay, so we're going to try a couple of these by trial and error. And then in the next page, we're going to see a different technique that's going to give us the same result. So the first one, okay? So I need to figure out different ways to break up 2 and 15. I start with 2 because there's only one way to break up 2 and 1, and 15 has several ways, 1 and 15 and 3 and 5, okay? So I try, so I'm going to write this as 2x and x, okay? That's one way to make 2x squared. Now, with trial and error, I'm going to try two different ways to make this 15 until I can figure out how it's going to work. So we're going to try first, let's say 5 times 3. So we're going to try 5 times 3. And we're going to see if this is the correct product. I already know 2x times x is x squared. I already know 5 times 3 is 15. So what I'm interested in are these mixed products that have the sum of the x terms. So in this example, let's see, 2 times 3, that's 6x. I know these are going to be positives, of course, because the only way to multiply to a positive is with two negatives or two positives. They have to be two positives for the positive 13. So like I said, 6x and 5, x in the middle. This would add to 11x, which is not what I want. I want 13x, which means I was not able to factor that correctly on the first try. So we're going to try again. All right, so if I try again, another option would be keeping the 2 and x for the first term. Now, because the first term is different, order matters. So having 2x plus 3 is different from 2x plus 5. So we're going to try the same two numbers, 3 and 5, in the opposite order and see if this was more productive. So try my outers and my innards. 2 times 5 is 10x. 3 times 1 is 3x. That adds up to 13x, which is what I am trying to get, which means that this is my solution. So just to write it clean and circle it, my solution is 2x plus 3 times x plus 5. That is the correct way to factor this one. We need to try, sorry, my chair. We need to try again. Part B here, we're going to break 15 and 6 down, again trying to get the product to make 23. So I start with 15. There are a couple different ways to break it down. I can do 15 and 1 or 3 and 5. So I'm going to start with 3 and 5. So we're going to start with 3q, leave empty space, 5q, and that makes my 15. Now there are also two different ways to make 6. I can make 6 and 1, 1 and 6, or 2 and 3, 3 and 2. So let's try 2 and 3. I don't know which of these is going to work. I do know because it's a positive 6, it's two positives or two negatives, and I know because the 23 is positive, they have to both be positives. Okay, so let's try our outers and our innards. This one gives us 3 times 3 is, that's our 9q, plus 2 times 5 is 10q. That would give us 19q. And that's not what I want because I want 23, so this one doesn't work. So we try again. Let's try 3q with and 5q with. Instead of 2 and 3, let's switch the order and try 3 and 2. Again, both positives. Outers give us 6q, innards give us 15q. 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 5 is 15, and when I add those together, I get 21q, and that's not it either. I'm trying to get 23. Okay, so the combination of 3 and 5 for 15 and 2 and 3 for 6 don't work. I still have other possibilities. What if it is 3q and 5q still, but instead of 2 and 3 for 6, it is 6 and 1. So let's say it's 6 and 1. Okay, and outers this time, 3q times 1 is 3q, 6 times 5 is 30q, that would give me 33q. That's not it either. Okay, last possibility for the 3q and the 5q would be if instead of 6 and 1, I chose 1 and 6. Okay, but both positives I know. So the outers, 3 times 6 is 18q, plus 1 times 5, the inners, is 5q. Those add to 23q. 23q is what I'm trying to get, which means this is the correct factoring. So my answer for this one factored is going to be 3q plus 1 times 5q plus 6. Okay. If that one hadn't worked, I would have exhausted the possibilities for having 3q and 5q as the two leading terms, and then I would have done 4 more until I found the right answer, where I would have used the other ways to multiply to 15, which are 15 and 1. I would have had 15q and 1q, and I could have tried 2 and 3 again with that pairing, and 6 and 1 again with that pairing. So there were 8 possibilities altogether that I could have tried for this one until I got the right answer. Okay. So trial and error can be short. You can get it in the first try if you're lucky. You can get it in the second try if you're lucky. And if you choose your numbers in a different order, you could not get it until the 4th try or the 8th try, depending on what order you happen to choose things in. So there's another technique. We're going to look at the next other technique on the back side. And this is the technique called factoring by grouping. This technique is a little longer than each of the individual trial and error methods. However, it works every time, and so I don't have to cross things out and try again. I will always be able to factor by this grouping technique. Okay, so I'm going to be factoring by grouping. The first thing, this is also called the AC method, because the first thing to do is to find the product of A times C, first times last. So my product of A times C, 3 times negative 12 is negative 36. And then I factor my negative 36 in an attempt to get the 16, the middle term, just like I would factor if I had an A value of 1. Because 36 is negative, I know I need a positive and a negative, and because the middle term is positive, I know the positive number needs to be the larger of the two. Then I start trying to figure out what goes into 36. So first thing that goes into my mind, 12 and 3, so I would try 12 minus 3, which would give me 9. That's not the 16, so I'm going to try again. 36 is also 6 and 6. 6 minus 6 gives me 0, so that pairing doesn't work, so we try again. 36 is also 18 times 2, so 18 minus 2 gives me 16. That's the pair that's going to work. And so when I do factoring by grouping, I can't just use those last two numbers because of the coefficient 3, and this wasn't a 36 to begin with. But what I do instead is rewrite the question with the middle term split into these two pieces. The two pieces that we have discovered add up to that piece. So I'm going to write this as 3x squared plus 18x minus 2x minus 12. We're separating that middle term by the two values that we found that multiply to our 36 and add to that middle term, that's 16. Okay. Then, once it's separate, we're going to group. So we're going to factor the first two, and then we're going to factor the second two using our grouping method. So the first two, 3x squared and 18x, can both be divided by 3 and x. If you factor that out, it leaves you with x plus 18 divided by 3 is 6. The next two terms can both be divided by negative 2. If you divide that out, it leaves you with x. Negative 12 divided by negative 2 is positive 6. Remember that your binomials need to be the same so that you can factor it out. You take x plus 6 out, and then the new factor will be 3x minus 2 from the fronts of both of those. Okay, so this is factored. Okay. I could have gotten the same result from the trial and error method. This is just another method for factoring when they have a coefficient a. This is actually the method that most people prefer to use because they like to have something that works consistently rather than having to guess and try different values until they find the pair that works. Okay, we're going to practice this method again. So on the next example, AC, first of all, I want to find that product of A times C, that's 12 times negative 5, is going to be negative 60. Once again, that's negative. So I want to use a positive and a negative. The only way to multiply to a negative number is with one positive and one negative. This time, the negative needs to be larger because my middle term is negative. It needs to add to a negative number. So when I find out what goes into 60, the first thing I think of is 12 and 5. So negative 12 plus 5 would give me negative 7. And then I try other things that go into 60 since that one didn't work. And I know it's 6 and 10, so the negative larger would make that a negative 10 plus a 6, which would add to a negative 4, and that is the pair I want. So I'm going to want to then use negative 10 and 6 as the two numbers that I break this into. So starting with 12a squared, we're going to separate the middle term. Instead of writing negative 4a, we're going to write minus 10a and then plus 6a and then minus 5. Then we group first two terms and last two terms. The first two terms can both be divided by 2 and a. If you divide 2 and a out, it's going to give you 6a minus 5 plus the second two terms, 6a minus 5, have nothing in common. So the only thing I'd be able to divide out is 1. If I divide out 1, 6 divided by 6 is 1. I've got 6 minus 5a, which is perfect because my 6 minus 5a's are the same. So I'm going to be able to factor out the group 6 minus 5a, and I'll be left with the two coefficients, which are 2a plus 1. So it's very important I write the 1 there because that 1 is going to be part of my second factor. Okay. So we've got a few more problems to do. We're going to factor them, and you can use whichever technique suits you. You can either factor by trial and error, or you can factor by grouping using the AC method. Okay. So just because I'm not sure which method is going to be your preference, I'm going to do half each. So I'm going to do the problems on the right side of the page by trial and error, or the left side of the page by trial and error, and I'm going to do the right side of the page by grouping. If you have a different preference, you can do them all by trial and error or all by grouping, and you will see that you will get the same answers as I. Okay. So first, if I want to do this next one by trial and error, I'm going to take my 10, break it down. So 2 and 5 or 10 and 1. I usually start with the two factors that are closer together. So I'm going to try 2 and 5. Okay. Now, one of these needs to be positive and one of them needs to be negative because the 24 is negative. And I know that the middle term is positive, so the larger product needs to be the positive. Okay. My 24, let's see what goes into 24. There's a lot of possibilities. I can try 8 and 3 or 6 and 4. I'm going to start by trying 8 and 3. Let's see how we do. So 3 and 8. I'm not sure which one's positive, which one's negative, so I'm just going to leave those signs off and I'll put them back in later. Okay, so the first one, 2 times 8 is 16. And the middle one, 3 times 5 is 15. Oh, it's so close. I just need to put the sign in there. I know that if my 15 is negative, that's going to give me a positive 1. So the 15 came from this inner one, so that's the one that needs to be negative, and the other one needs to be positive. Okay, and I found out on my first try, which was lucky. I had no idea I was going to find out on the first try. There were lots of possibilities I could have used on this one. For example, if I had used 6 and 4 or 2 and 12 instead of the 8 and the 3, or if I did my 8 and 3 in the opposite order, I would have been still searching on this one. So my answer is going to be 2x minus 3 times 5x plus 8. Okay. The next one in part B, we're going to use the grouping method on this one. So the first thing that you're always doing at any of these is looking for a GCF, a number that's in common between all of them. If there is, you want to factor that out first. And that's not the case in either of these, so I'm going to begin using my trial and error or my grouping method. In the next one, I'm going to use grouping, so I'm going to start first times last. So that's 9 AC. So 9 times 4 is 36. It's a positive 36, so I know I need 2 negatives or 2 positives, and it's going to have to be 2 positives because the middle term is also positive. Okay, so what goes into 36? I know that it's 9 and 4. So 9 plus 4 would add to 13. That one doesn't work. What else goes into 36? 36 is also, let's see, 3 times 12. And that adds to 15. That doesn't work. It's also 6 plus 6. 6 times 6 is 36. That adds to 12. So that's the pair that I'm going to want. I want to add to 12. Okay? So just kind of think about your 36 a couple times until you get the right pair. And then This one is 9p squared plus, instead of 12pq, we're going to separate it into 6pq plus 6pq plus 4q squared. Then we're going to group. So the first two terms can both be divided by 3 and p. So I'm going to take 3p out. I'm going to be left with 9 divided by 3 is 3, so 3p, plus 6 divided by 3 is 2p taken out, so just q left. Plus, next two terms, you can divide them both by 2, and they both have a q. Divide the 2q out, you're left with 3p plus 2q. So the binomial in common is 3p plus 2q. And then the coefficients of each binomial, the first one is 3p, plus the second one is 2q. Notice that you have 3p plus 2q twice, so this would be simplified by writing it as 3p plus 2q squared. Okay. Last two problems on this page. We're going to continue on the left side here doing trial and error, then we'll do grouping again on this side. So first, trial and error. Before I begin, I notice that there is a greatest common factor here, so I need to take care of that first. There is something in common. It's 4 actually, and k. So I'm going to divide these both by 4k. So the first term becomes 3. K squared minus the second term becomes 7k plus last term just 2. Okay, so I'm going to try my trial and error here. Keep your 4k on the outside. And then the only way to break down 3k is with 3k and 1k. So I'll have 3k and k as the beginnings. And the only way to make 2 is 2 and 1. So we're going to try each of these. Let's try 2 and 1. And I know that they both need to be negative because I need to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. So they both have to be the same. So we'll make them both negatives right away. Okay. So this one would be 3 times negative 1 is negative 3k. And then negative 2 times k is negative 2k. That one's going to add to negative 5k in the middle. I need negative 7, so this didn't work. Okay, so we'll try again. 4k. We're going to keep that 3k first and the k second. But instead of 2 and 1, I only have one more possibility, right? Is if I did 1 and 2. So let's try this one. So 3 times negative 2, that's negative 6k minus 1k is going to give us negative 7k, which again is what we are trying to get, right? We're trying to get that negative 7k in the middle. So this pairing works. So that means that my answer is going to be 4k times 3k minus 1 times k minus 2. So it took me 2 tries with trial and error to get the correct factored form. Okay? So in the next one, we're going to do our grouping method again. But first, I noticed there is a greatest common factor. So I need to factor that out first. So I look at these and I see that you can divide them all by 2 and x and y. So we're going to factor out 2xy. It's going to leave you with 10x squared minus 19x plus 6. Okay. Then we're going to continue to group this piece using the AC method this time. So a times c, 10 times 6 is 60. Break down your 60. It's going to have to be 2 negatives because you have to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. Okay, so what goes into 60? 2 negatives, double negative. So 60, 6 and 10, so that would be negative 10, negative 6 is negative 16. That one didn't work. What else goes into 60? 15 and 4. So negative 15, negative 4 would be negative 19. That's what I need. Okay. So leaving your 2xy way outside, just put some big brackets around that. You're going to separate and do your 10x squared minus 15x minus 4x, then your plus 6. And we're going to group, basically ignoring the 2xy until the end, when we will just keep it in front of the factored form here. Group your first two, 10 and 15 can both be divided by both 5 and x. It's going to leave you 5 times 2x minus 3. Minus, you can divide both 4 and 6 by 2, so minus 2 times 2x, 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. Check your binomials, they're the same, so that's great news. So you're going to have 2xy times that common binomial is 2x minus 3. I can drop my big brackets now once I get the rest of it factored. So it's going to have The second binomial being the coefficients of 5x minus 2. And that's my factored form. It's also the end of part A.